Hello and welcome back to my channel. In this video I'm going to discuss with you a short story, The Little Match Girl, in a very simple and lucid way so that learning can be real quick and easy for you. The Little Match Girl was written by a Danish writer, Hans Christian Andersen. He is also known as father of fairy tales by some. He has written some of the classic fairy tales like The Little Mermaid, Thumbelina, The Ugly Duckling, The Princess and the Pea, and many more. So we would expect some fairy tales elements in this short story too. But this story is a fairy tale with a tragic end. It is not restricted to children alone and has theme of universal appeal like pain and suffering of poor, the indifferent attitude of rich towards them, child abuse, and how a festival can be totally different without love, money, or familial bonding and affection. So let's start with the story. It was bitterly cold, snow was falling, and darkness was gathering, for it was the last evening of the old year. It was New Year's Eve. New Year's Eve, a time of festivity when our house is lighted with candles and delicious foods are prepared for everyone to enjoy. But this is not for the little girl. For her, it is just a bitterly cold and snowy evening, like any other evening, where she has to struggle very hard for basic necessities like food, clothing, and shelter. In the cold and gloom, a poor little girl walked, bareheaded and barefoot through the streets. In the cold weather, the first thing which we are told to do is to protect ourselves from the cold by covering our head, by covering our ears, and protecting ourselves with warm clothes. She is a little girl and still she is bareheaded. Her head is not covered with any clothing. Her foot does not have any slippers. She had some slippers, we have been told in the story, trying to escape herself from two speeding carriages. She had run fast and she had lost both the slippers there. So we can see that even she faces so many dangers outside the house. If she could not escape those carriages, it could have been fatal for her. And one of those slippers she could not find in the snow, and the other was taken away by a child who gives some stupid reason for that. So the little girl walked about the streets on her naked feet, which were red and blue with the cold. This is obvious. It is snowing and she is walking barefoot. Her feet are frozen and they are red and blue with the cold. In her old apron, she carried a great many matches and she had a packet of them in her hand as well. Nobody had bought any from her and no one had given her a single penny all day. Now in the Victorian era, a law had been passed in which begging was prohibited. You couldn't beg. So as an alternative to begging, children used to sell matches, that they are so poor that they are selling matches. So few, out of some sympathy, out of some pity, they used to give money as we give to the beggars. But this girl, there hasn't been anyone kind enough to even buy her matches. She crept along, shivering and hungry, the picture of misery, poor little thing. Even the picture the way author has portrayed of the girl, it seems that she is the poorest of poor. just the image of poverty, of misery she is. She doesn't have proper clothing. She is out in gloom and cold when everyone is comfortable inside their home enjoying their festival, and she does not even have proper clothing to save herself from extreme weather of that time. The snowflakes fell on her long golden hair, which curled so prettily about her neck. But she did not think of her appearance now. How could she? Author has described her as a pretty little girl, as most of the children are, but her hunger is so severe that she could not think of her appearance. Lights were shining in every window, and there was a glorious smell of roast goose in the street, for this was New Year's Eve. This is very important to show the contrast between the rich and poor. There are wealthy who are celebrating with candles, Christmas trees, and delicious dishes inside their house, warm and cozy. And here the poor little child is shaking and shivering with cold and hunger, deprived of even basic necessities. She huddled down in a heap in a corner formed by two houses, one of which projected further out into the street than the other. We wonder why she doesn't return home. She has been selling matches whole day, but she hasn't been able to do that. So why doesn't she return home now when it is cold and gloom, when it is cold and dark? But home is a place where we are loved and have the warmth of family bonding and of shelter. But she has none. Her home is full of cracks and it's totally dilapidated. The only difference is of a roof, and plus she hasn't earned anything, so she will get thrashings from her father. Her father would beat her. We can say that extreme poverty and cruelty of her father makes her choose to stay out rather than to go home. Her thin hands were almost numb with cold. If only she dared pull just one small match from the packet to warm her fingers. She even had to think before lighting a single match. She pulled one out, scratch, how it spluttered and burnt. And this is the time when she sees her first vision of a great iron stove with polished brass knobs and brass ornaments. This reflects her utmost desire of warmth. How badly she needed some warmth from this spine-chilling snowy cold. And she had started to feel lovely warmth, and she had even spread her legs to warm her cold and red and blue legs when out went the flame and everything vanished. She struck another and second vision is that of a roast goose stuffed with prunes and apples, steaming deliciously. This vision has a bit of fairy tales elements when delicious goose hopping across the floor comes to her with fork and knife. So the second vision clarifies her next utmost desire of food. She is starving and she needs food. But again the flame goes out and all the hope of getting food is vanished. The third vision is that of a beautiful Christmas tree. 1,000 candles lit up the green branches. The many candles on the Christmas tree rose higher and higher through the air, turning into bright stars. One of them fell, streaking the sky with light. All the visions she had in the light of matches only reflected her unfulfilled wishes and dreams. But all her light of hope is overshadowed by cold and gloom in her life. Now someone is dying, said the little girl. Her grandmother had told, whenever a star falls, a soul goes up to God. And we start to imagine who that someone can be who will be dying. And here, girl remembers her grandmother, the only person who had ever shown her love, but she is dead now. And her fourth vision shows her a strong desire to be with her grandmother, to share some love with her. So this time when she lights the match, there appears her grandmother, bright and shining, and looking so gentle, kind and loving. "Granny," cried the little girl, "oh, take me with you. I know you will disappear when the match is burnt out, like other visions." So to stay with her grandmother longer, she struck all the rest of the matches. The matches flared brightly as if it was broad daylight, and her grandmother looked so stately and beautiful. She took the little girl in her arms and flew with her, high up, oh so high, towards glory and joy. Now they knew neither cold, nor hunger, nor fear, for they were both with God. So now we get to know that someone who would be dying was actually the little girl who will leave this miserable earthly life and go to heaven with her grandmother. In this, the author has shown us how sometimes earthly life can be so difficult for the poor, and thus the child pleads her grandmother to take her to heaven, where she can be free from all pain and suffering of cold, hunger, or any other fear. The next morning, the little girl's dead body was found with the burnt out matches clutched between her fingers. She was dead, frozen to death on the last evening of the old year. The dawn of the new year rose on the huddled figure of the girl. So, the New Year's Eve is a symbol for the beginning of a new life after death of the girl in heaven. The last evening of the old year was the last evening of the girl's miserable life. The new year brings glorious changes to the girl's life, which others have no eyes to see. Those people who are looking at her dead body and wondering why she has a smile and rosy cheeks, why she has a smile on her dead face. So they knew nothing what she had felt and saw. The author takes a dig at the so-called civilized society where we don't have the eyes to see through the plight of thousands of such hungry faces in our own cities and towns every day. So in its appeal, this story transcends all ages and cultures. Even the girl is unnamed in the story. The place and year of the story is untold. This might be a deliberate attempt from the writer to keep the story universal in its appeal. So the story ends with giving us what real misery is, and that we should be kind and helpful towards the poor and unprivileged people in our society.